So we're gonna learn about studying effectively techniques. We're gonna go over 2 techniques today. We're gonna be going over memory palaces and the teaching someone else or the prodigy technique, as well as the Feynman technique. So the first one, I thought it was interesting when it relates to environment as well. So finding a place that's clean and quiet, like a library or a study room or a desk in the living room to study. And so that's the number one requirement. But then the technique itself refers to creating a palace in our memory with things to correlate to. So for example, I have here my next exam in anatomy is gonna be muscles of the cat. So I have to memorize all of these muscles, and we did a dissection, and I have to learn and know them by memory and spelling because of the lab practical. So the memory palaces technique, which is an ancient Greek technique, says that if I correlate each one of the groups of muscles to, say, it could be anything, like if I'm in the living room, it could be like a sticky notepad and a color pencil and a phone charger. So things that my memory is very familiar with and that are simple to remember in order to have an anchor in my mind to file this new knowledge. So once the knowledge is filed and my brain accepted the new information, then the retrieval process becomes simple. So that's what they call a memory palace. So now instead of remembering the entire group of muscles, all I have to remember is sticky notes, and that'll prompt my memory to recall and retrieve the muscle groups here. So pectoanterobrachialis, pectoralis major, pectoralis minor, xiphohumerales, latissimus dorsi. And that's what studying with the memory palaces technique entails. So ability to study effectively and open up reserves of memories. Once you master this technique, you too are going to dramatically improve your ability to study effectively, and finally open up your dormant reserves of memory. So, excuse me. So with the already acquired knowledge, so we can tap into what we know about muscular anatomy. And so as basic or complex as it might be, there is a reserve of memory within everybody's brain about what a muscle is and how it relates to humans versus animals. So the idea is simple. You walk through an environment like a house, and you place objects in specific places, and then you match the things you want to learn with those objects. So when you are trying to remember that information, you don't think of just your notes. You remember the objects to the notes and which objects are what and what's the color. This technique match is something your brain has evolved to do extremely well, and it allows you to do extremely well. Recall imagery is in specific locations. We call recall imagery in specific locations. So when I'm taking my lab practical, I'm gonna remember, okay, so if I see a muscle in the dissection, instead of only recalling, in order for me to retrieve the memory quickly and effectively and the spelling of it correctly, I will remember I was in the living room. It'll be like a split of a second memory, then split of a second memory, and then boom, I know pecto antebrachialis, PECTO antebrachialis. So whatever trick I use to remember the correct spelling, the pronunciation, the muscle, the function, and the attachments, it'll be based on the very basic retrieving technique of recall imagery. So that is, I think, a brilliant retrieval technique because of the recall imagery storage that as older adults, as non-conventional students, especially I'm a non-conventional student, so the vast storage of recall imagery. So that's one for memorizing. Then the teaching someone else, or the prodigy technique, this one is great for understanding. Sorry. So the teaching someone else, like pretending like you're teaching 12-year-old, it helps with conceptualizing a topic and simplifying it in order to explain it to in a very simple concept. So when you choose to teach someone else your work, when you choose to teach someone else your work, you work hard understanding the concept yourself first, and simplifying your understanding in order to create a concrete and simple message. So when I think about my 5-year-old, if I'm gonna show him the video of my dissections in my anatomy class, I'm gonna say something along the lines of very simple terms. Okay, that's not a very good example. So for example, explaining where the pecto antebrachialis, what that is to someone. Even though muscles are not a concept, they do entail an understanding of the muscle, because a muscle, it's not just a single piece of flesh. It's so much correlated with the bones and the attachments and the flexions and movement, and it allows for movement, and it also covers the bones. It serves as a protective covering. So in order for someone to understand the function, the physiology of a muscle, which this class is not so much about physiology, but to understand the function, to memorize the muscles, it is important to simplify the concepts, to understand the basic function of a muscle is to allow for movement. So we move because we have muscles that attach to bones. Bones on its own don't provide movement, muscles do. And they receive signals from the brain to provide us with the ability to move and be kinesthetic people. To relate more accurately and apply it more effectively, it provides with depth of processing. So then the next technique I'm not as familiar with is called the Feynman technique. It says, write the name of a concept on the top of a blank piece of paper. So for example, so the pecto antebrachialis. So this is like a blank sheet of paper, and then we just write one word. It could be muscles, And once we write the word mussels, we brainstorm what we know. So this one, the way I also understand it, is with the SQ3R technique, which is within the scan part of the learning strategy. You just write the word and do like a diagram around what we already know about the topic in order for our brain to tap into that source of knowledge, and then for our brain to continue to add onto that knowledge and create new brain synapses. So write it down as if you're teaching it to someone younger than you. Identify what is missing and review everything and simplify as much as you can. So here is where the learning happens in this technique. So review or scan. So question how this can sound simpler. So, and then this is the learning aspect of adding new information. So that could be attending lecture, attending lab, reading, watching YouTube videos, or study groups, attending lab, reviewing lecture notes, especially reviewing lecture notes because we're always studying to ace the test as much as we are to retain the knowledge. So some of the final strategies that I have are to vary your study time, is to either choose different tools to complement your study. So listening to music could be a way of stimulating your brain to learn better and memorize faster. So study in the same place. So there was a study where student performance increased the more you test yourself. So the more you complete online tests and see the score, the better the retention rate. So memory games to recall information, like when it pertains to memorizing a list of correlated terms, we could use mnemonics. So memory games could also be the second part of the Feynman technique, which is writing down a word on a page, or just like the memorization of it, repetition, and being effective with the knowledge. So once I memorize this list, I will continue to do test my knowledge of the spelling of each one of the words to make sure that I'm prepared for my lab exam. All right, that's all. Thank you.